much. Thank you, Dr. Ma, for that wonderful presentation. So I'd like to invite the other panelists to join us as well. And we're gonna, let's see, oh, it works. It's always impressive. We're gonna take a few questions from the audience for the next few minutes. And I'd like to ask people interested in asking a question. There are two mics at the back on the right and left, so you can always line up there. And I know that the next session is lunch, so we'll end by 11:55 so that we can all enjoy a nice lunch. Yes, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you so much for all your amazing work. I'm really curious to hear from each of you about your experience translating from laboratory research to commercialized product. And I'm curious from your experience, what has been or is the most challenging stage and how long did it take?
I think that's where really I personally am trying to engage business collaborators to really think about how do we take the evidence we have generated and you really find an avenue for it to become a commercialized product that could be accessed by average people. There are many challenges. So one of which is that as a researcher, I really do not have the business mindset and also the know-how to do that. And that's where, kind of speaks to sort of collaboration with, kind of experts from other fields. And that's a need, but I think that's also kind of a new adventure, at least for myself.
Well, I have too long of an answer for now, but it took 12 years from idea to FDA approval, but that involved the prototype, fundamental research, patent filing, company formation, Series A to D, an IPO, phase 3 trials, and 2 years in the FDA medical device pathway with a de novo product. So 12 years seems short when you think about all those steps, but and it would be faster now that there's a predicate, there's a 510K pathway, there's lots of things that make it better, but it's super hard, obviously, and you get lucky, you get unlucky, and you just keep pushing through. I think the most telling thing for me was the idea of getting a completely unique product through the FDA just felt like Everest, and it was something that we just kept our eye on for over a decade, despite all the forces that were preventing us. And then when you get it, you feel so excited, and then you realize, oh, this is not Everest, this is the foothills, and then we need insurance reimbursement and marketing and uptake with treatment that no one's ever even thought of as medicine before. And so that was a real eye-opener. And I'm sure when we finally, which is starting to happen now, actually, Medicare and Medicaid codes were released 5 years after regulatory approval, starting in January for digitally delivered ADHD treatments. So that starts January 2026. So you could see that sort of valley of death that exists between regulatory approval and reimbursement, where if you don't have a lot of money, like if you're not a giant company going into it, it's very hard to survive that period. And many companies did not. We barely did. And then with that, there's still globalization. So, I mean, every step has like a unique challenge that takes a lot of people with experience and creativity. So,
is my mic on?
Yeah,
yes. Yeah, so it's such a good question. For me, it comes back to, I was thinking about the title of my talk today. It's really sharing the passion. I think when you are pursuing something that's someone else is also passionate about, it's much easier to do something together. So I was at a different conference. The conference was about academia industry partnership. It's the same. I want to do something that is not only interesting from me as a scientist, as a researcher, but also something interesting for someone who comes from an industry background. And on that note, I also want to shout out to my lab co-director, Dr. Gazzaley, who has been sharing my passion for all these years, 15 years and counting. So I think the only thing I would like to add is really find something that is, that everyone is passionate about, and we can do this together and change the world.
That's such a good
Thank
point
you.
because the collaborations are truly interdisciplinary when the passions and the goals are shared, and they can be very effective. We can go to the next question. And do you mind introducing yourself for the audience as
Yeah.
well, and then asking your question?
Well, first of all, I was really captivated by you all's presentations, so just thank you. My name is Ryan. I'm an undergrad here in the Symbolic Systems program and then a master's student in computer science. So my question was inspired by Dr. Leow's talk. So like I have a friend with bipolar disorder, and I know sometimes it's kind of hard for me to wrap my head around, being in a manic state. And kind of at the end of your talk, you were talking about kind of the next steps going forward of, empowering people with their data points and this metadata about how they can, be better informed and know themselves better. So I guess I was kind of wondering though, how, if there's kind of work, if you have thoughts about kind of the phenomenology of being in a manic state and like how that might be, like if, for example, there was some kind of feedback about, hey, like you're staying up till 4 a.m, how that, how that data point might be received. But just in general, like for all the panelists, I know this is a precision neuroscience conference, but also I was wondering if you guys have thoughts about precision of kind of phenomenological kind of states and how we're feeling.
First, thank you for that comment and question. So this is something I've been thinking about after that we had a pre-planning meeting a few weeks ago. And then I learned this phrase, closed loop experience. And ever since then, I've been thinking about it. How can we make sure that we can turn our technology into something that provides closed loop experience? And also like this idea that experience is a form of medication. That's such a powerful statement. There's only one more thing I want to say is that it's very interesting to think about this human brain, which is a natural intelligence, how it is fundamentally different than current artificial intelligence, in the sense that the human brain is embedded in the physical world. And it learns by having sensory and motor interactions with the world. So how can we leverage technology so that the human brain can receive better information so it can learn better? So this is something I think about every day. And I would love to pick your brain on this.
Any additional comments on that question? or-
I
We
think
can-
you described it.
Okay, well, maybe we'll move to the next question, just so we can get through a couple more before.
Thanks so much for you guys for the amazing insights. My name is Rima, and I'm a board member of AIM Youth Mental Health and Bring Change to Mind, both focused on the youth side of mental health. And I know, Adam, you're on the scientific advisory board of both, coincidentally. So my interest is more in, given that firstly, there's a youth mental health crisis. And given that youth and adolescents are the most vulnerable population and least ethically permissible to test some of these, digital-based tools on, what is the field, or what can the field do to responsibly balance innovation with evidence? And if I may layer on, what kind of testing tools, whether it's digital twins, proxy populations, regulatory sandboxes, can be applied to ensure efficacy, but also safety to ensure the youth are not left behind?
Does anyone want to?
I
Take
can
that
answer that a bit. I mean, it's a great question, and it's, in many ways, that's the population that may be impacted the most by our lack of good intent. I'm not saying bad intentions, but lack of clear intentions and good monitoring of our digital technologies over the last 15, 20 years, right? That we were just essentially irresponsible in how we developed technologies that felt, fine. They weren't going to be harmful. They connected people, they're fun. And we never really took the steps that we should have been to say, could this go bad? What is it like for a 12-year-old girl or boy to be knowing what every single other person is doing at that moment except them, and just even little things and the big things. And we just ignored that for a long time. So I think your question is incredibly relevant in that this is our opportunity to sort of make amends and really catch up in how we are more thoughtful, both when we design and develop and put things out in the world on how they're affecting our youth. In terms of outside of that, what I just said is, I think it's true for anything that we create. It doesn't have to be a medical device. If it's out there and it impacts people's experience, we should think about it in a very serious way from the very beginning. It doesn't have to be that we only restrict 14-year-olds from going into bars, but, do we restrict 14-year-olds from going on social media? And, I think that we've just been, we haven't taken it seriously enough. On the medical side, when we start thinking about experiences as medicine, there's a reason why we did phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, multiple phase 3 trials for a video game, because it deserves that seriousness in terms of knowing what its efficacy is, who it benefits, who it doesn't benefit, can it have harmful effects? Completely reasonable to ask those questions. So when you're thinking about these as interventions for children, there are pathways on how you get IRB approval and do randomized controlled trials with good oversight that are appropriate. Those trials are being done with drugs and other types of devices. So we could take the same methodology, as rigorous and as hard and as expensive as it often is, and apply it to digital technologies for children. And we have done a lot of that work, and including things like virtual reality for dyslexia project that we're doing right now. And just take it seriously. Just because it's digital and it's not a drug or an implantable device doesn't mean that we don't bring the highest level of rigor and attention to thinking about its impact.
Add to that, is this on? I might add to that attention to children and young adults should also, in parallel, include our thoughts of attention to designing for older adults as well. And I know you have all thought about that quite a lot. So making sure we're not leaving anyone behind, regardless of where they are on the life spectrum. So we'll take one more question, if that's okay. And then I think I do want to make sure that everyone has a time to get to lunch. So final question for the group.
I'll make it brief. So I'm Ravi Durjati. I'm an implementation scientist by training. And so my question to some extent reflects my training as well. So this has been touched upon, but can you also speak to trying to improve the access and reach of the technologies that we develop, especially if they're very highly customized technologies that are very resource intensive? How do we get them to the broader population? What are your thoughts on that? And also speak to, can we have some of these technologies in the public domain as a resource that a broader swath of people across the country, maybe across the world, can access? The access issue of these technologies, can the panel speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah, I can start. I think that's a great point, right? And it's also reflected, I think, across all three talks, that I think this important point about you have to start with the end in mind with such interventions or platforms or, the tools. You need to really be clear on what's the population you are trying to reach and what barriers you are trying to really address. And also when you carry out your work, research, and then, translation, to really involve the populations, in that process. And we were pleased that, in our trials, as I presented, we were able to recruit, and based on where we were able to recruit participants across all major demographic groups, and that's essential. And that's just one example of how you involve the intended, target populations along this development and the research pipeline.
I would say access is a way harder problem than I appreciated. You could build something that works, something that's needed, something that's approved, something that's filling a gap that is critical, and still have trouble with access. And there's lots of reasons for that. There's awareness, there's other market forces that can compete. There's how much does it cost? There's so many factors, and it's a whole other field and takes a whole other group of experts to solve these. It's also a very noisy space, right? I mean, who has the loudest influencer and the most sensational TikTok ad? And, you're competing against others that have no evidence at all, but have loud voices and big marketing dollars. And so it's complicated. Are you on the medical side where you're regulated and likely need insurance reimbursement, or you're on the wellness side where it's the Wild West and you have to compete against others that are willing to make any claim, even if it's not appropriate, when you're not willing to do that? So, there's just so much there, but it's critical because you could do decades of work and then not get it to people. And I appreciate how painful that is and how important it is to do that. The other thing I want to say is that it's a big world. And, for example, we struggled with the video game treatment in the US, but Japan is now moving way faster than we did. And we see signals from India and Saudi Arabia and Brazil that they will move more rapidly. So sometimes you just, go where the impact can happen quicker, create those cases, and then move to other places.
Thank you so much. So with that, I'd like to thank Dr. Leow, Dr. Ma, and Dr. Gazzaley for their incredible work and presentations today. And thank you all for your attention. I know there were still a couple of questions in the audience. We're here if you want to come up and ask them. And thank you so much for your attention today.
So we'll now have lunch. Please help yourself, and we will recommence at 1 o'clock.